Hey everybody, it's Ron, and today I'm going to be talking about the first book in the Dune prequel series called Dune House Atreides. Most of you will know that this series of books is written by Frank Herbert's son Brian, along with Kevin J. Anderson. Before I read this, all I heard was how bad they were compared to the original books, but after I finished 4 books in the regular series, I was really obsessed with this universe, and I was too curious not to check it out, even though most Dune fans don't really like this series. This might be an unpopular opinion, but overall, I did enjoy reading this first book. I'm not sure how I'll feel about all of the Dune prequel books, because I have a lot ahead of me, but so far this one doesn't really disrespect or ruin the events of the original novels, at least for me. Sure, the writing is not on the same level as Frank's, but there are some advantages to this, in my opinion. I know Frank Herbert's vision was more about the philosophy and themes more than action and world building, but he also did a great job setting this really cool vision up of the future, and I guess this book scratched my itch a little bit for that, because as much as Frank's books are superior, I did want to read more about some of the other planets and people that are mostly just mentioned in his books and not explored. This is obviously because I'd say about 80% of his books are all on Arrakis. I enjoyed spending more time on Giedi Prime, Ix, Kaitain, and Caladan, among other newly introduced planets in this book. I appreciate that Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson expand the world of Dune, and I had a good time reading about younger versions of these characters that I've come to know so well in the original Dune novel. For example, one of my favorite things about this book is the Duncan Idaho origin. Did we really need to go back and read about this character's younger years? No, but I have to admit that I was curious. I thought it was interesting that Duncan grew up on Giedi Prime, which is the home of the Harkonnens. Duncan and his parents were basically slaves, and he was hunted by the Harkonnens, and particularly the Beast Raban, for sport, which is very in line with something the Harkonnens would do. Raban killing both of his parents right in front of him explains why he would hate the Harkonnens so much, and why he would later be so loyal to House Atreides. I enjoyed the section where he outsmarts the Harkonnen hunters and escapes the planet to travel to Caladan. Insights like this only enhance the character, who wasn't really in the first novel that much. I'd say some other characters don't work as well, like the Baron. There are minor things that happen to the Baron that were surprising to me. He's described as handsome and in shape in the beginning of this book, and I didn't expect that at all. The decision to have Gaius Helen Mohiam be the one who eventually turns him into a hulking, grotesque figure took a while to accept for me. One of the main events in this book is when the Bene Gesserit Sisterhood are planning to give birth to the Kwisatz Haderach. After years of selective breeding, they decide that they need the Baron and Helen to procreate, and they basically blackmail the Baron into doing this. They have knowledge of him hoarding large amounts of the spice. He goes through with it the first time, and the baby ends up being deformed, so when they try again, the Baron's revenge is to force himself on Helen Mohiam in a brutal way, and that's when she unleashes a poison in his body that will slowly turn him into how he's described in the first novel. This is an interesting choice to explain why he becomes extremely obese and needs suspensors, but I don't know if it was necessary to have to explain why he became that way in the first place. It might have been better if he became that way on his own from years of power and indulging himself. It's not as bad as something like Anakin Skywalker in the prequels and having to accept that he would become Darth Vader everyone knows and loves in the original trilogy, but I can see how die-hard Dune fans could take issue with it, because I don't even know how I feel about it yet. I also didn't like when Raban killed a worm on Arrakis with ease towards the beginning of this book. To me, it takes away from the threat of these giant worms, knowing that the Harkonnens could kill them so easily, especially when they were seen as such larger-than-life creatures in the first Dune novel. I mostly enjoyed following a young Duke Leto and getting more time on Callahan. I liked the section with his father Paulus getting in a bullfight in an arena on Caladan, and for some reason I vividly pictured that scene more than anything else in the book. It was cool to read about something so much different than what I read in the first Dune novel, with different locations. Brian and Kevin start sowing the seeds of what the Duke Leto would become with the characterization of his father. Early on in the book, Leto gets sent to Ix, and it's kind of like this universe's version of studying abroad. He meets up with House Vernius, and it was cool to get to know a little bit more about this planet, but ultimately it did feel like filler. I also felt this way about most of the Pardet Kynes sections in this book. I know that a large aspect of Dune is the ecology, but I felt like concentrating on Pardet studying the planet got a bit boring, and maybe they didn't need to spend as much time as they did on it. I think the idea that he helped the planet evolve is interesting, but reading about it in detail isn't as enjoyable. His introduction to the Fremen is very similar to Paul and Jessica in the original, and I enjoyed the way he got in by helping a young Stilgar survive Harkonnen troops. But mostly his chapters did feel like a chore. I did like that they fleshed out Count Fenring and Shaddam a little more, and these parts of the book felt the most like Game of Thrones to me because they both schemed to get Shaddam's father Elrond killed so Shaddam can take his place as the Emperor. Fenring is one of the more sadistic characters in this book, and that's saying a lot because the Harkonnens do some terrible things in this book as well. There are some interesting references to the original books, like the Sook school doctors aiding a poisoned Elrond, and a closer look at the Guild Navigators. I did feel that towards the end, Leto becoming Duke after his father gets killed by a bull is a little rushed. Leto turns almost immediately into the Duke we know from Dune, and I felt he needed a little bit more development before he was thrusted into that position. The end of this book raises the stakes when the Harkonnens get their hands on new technology that makes their ships completely invisible. I like that this was set up to frame House Atreides and Duke Leto, but I did think it was a little easy and unimaginative just to be like, just make the ships invisible and fire on the Tleilaxu from the Atreides ship's positioning. In a way, it was interesting to see how the politics work with a trial, but since I've read Dune, I already know that Duke Leto would come out okay. So I think it was more to show his relationship with Shaddam than it was about building tension. I haven't read the second book yet, but I am more worried about Prince Romber and Kylea of House Vernius, who are now under the protection of House Atreides since their family was cast out of Ix. I feel like the Corrinos or the Harkonnens will eventually try to have them killed. Dominic Vernius seems like he's going to end up being a good foil in the next book because he's out for revenge since his wife was found and executed by the Sardaukar soldiers. I like the plot by Shaddam to try and synthesize an artificial spice, and I'm interested to see the development of that in this trilogy, since I know that the spice melange is still the only substance that controls the universe. I do wonder what goes wrong with this plan. Count Fenring being moved to Arrakis is also going to be fun in the next book, and I might take some flack from hardcore Dune fans, but overall I really enjoyed the expansion of this universe, and even though I know it's not what Herbert originally intended, I'm surprised at the way his world lends itself to action and adventure. If you want to say that the original books are way deeper and way better written, you won't get an argument from me. But I did mostly have fun with this for what it is. So far, it doesn't ruin anything major about the original series, but who knows, maybe as I keep going through the books, I'll feel different. I'd say check it out and decide for yourself if you've never tried the expanded Dune books, and you might have a good time despite some minor hiccups. Please be sure to like and subscribe if you're enjoying this content, and thanks for watching.